Today we'll discuss a model designed to simulate the behavior and decision-making processes of individuals within a social network. This model specifically represents how the probability of individuals taking certain actions change based on evolving attributes influenced by peer pressure, social media, and state campaigns. So before we talk about the details, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Daria Soboleva, um, and I'm a graduate student at Duke University.
To start, could you explain the main objective of this model? What specific behaviors and decision-making processes are you aiming to capture, and how do peer pressure, social media, and state campaigns come into play in influencing individual actions?
Yeah, so this model was um, designed to really apply to any kind of decision making, where people's opinion can be influenced by peer pressure or just social norms, uh, social media influence, and also governmental influence, campaigns, interventions, policies, laws, whatever that might look like. So as long as there's a decision-making model specified, that can be extended to anything. So for example, it can be to certain habits like smoking, um, consuming certain products like clothes or foods. It can be extended to things like having children potentially. So as long as the decision making model for each change is specified, it can be extended to anything. It does rely on having access to either data, or it can be randomly generated as well data if the person's just trying to see kind of how these three influences combine. But the main goal is to see how the interaction of these three different influences can have an effect on the decision-making model based on specified parameters, like how much the person is susceptible to peer pressure, how much they're susceptible to social media, how much they care about the government, and how much they interact, how many friends they have. And so all these parameters can be specified by the user, and the user can see how that's going to affect the decision-making process.
What were some of the biggest challenges you encountered while developing this simulation? Was it complex to model the interactions between agents and accurately simulate the effects of these influencing factors on their actions?
Yeah, so that was the most difficult part, is choosing how people's opinions are influenced. It's very difficult to summarize in just one equation or one system of equations how a person makes up their mind about anything. And so there's a lot of assumptions that have to go on. Um, and it's difficult to pick those assumptions wisely without making it simplified enough so that it's possible to calculate, but not too much that it's unrealistic. And for each of these three influences, or peer pressure, social media, and the government, we had to make a decision of what the influence is going to look like. And that was based mostly on existing literature and what we know about how people make decisions, how much they care about what they see on the internet and on social media, how people are influenced based on their attributes. But it's still subject to criticism because, again, it's very difficult to summarize these things in just one clean equation. And another difficulty that was related mostly to finding results was computationally, it's very expensive to have many agents, but to have predictions that are can be generalized to like a small population, you have to have a lot of agents. And so that was a kind of, we had to balance out how many agents we can simulate to make it reasonable, but not too expensive to calculate, which is I think something that can be relaxed. This can be relaxed a little bit if we use like a different software like Python. And we use NetLogo, which is much more high level, but at the expense of the time it takes to run it. So that was the other difficulty that, well, and the third one is data. Again, having access to real world data, it makes a huge difference, and it can be really difficult to access and find overall. So yeah, that was the other thing.
Yeah. Moving on to the results, what insights have emerged from analyzing the model? Are there notable patterns in how individuals respond to social influences? Did any trends surprise you?
Well, I think with these kinds of models, I don't necessarily think that they're very useful to predict, well, this is exactly what's going to happen, or like this is the best course of action in solving any issue, or trying to see how we can guide people towards a desirable action. I think they're more useful in saying, okay, not this, like this is definitely not going to work. So one thing that we found is that excessive government campaigns or influence is actually not useful. It doesn't lead to any better results than just moderate influence, which I think is an interesting conclusion because obviously campaigns cost money. Any kind of policies, and that's time, that's money to implement them. And if we know that essentially bombarding people with campaigns and very restrictive policies is not going to make a huge difference, or the marginal effect is going to have is diminishing, then we can essentially exclude that from the possible courses of action. And so that was one. And the other things that we found is that social media, for instance, can act as a polarizing force, because some literature says that it can show people content that they already like, and then further they believe some things that they already believe in, so creating this like echo chambers. And we found that this is not necessarily always bad. It can be positive to an extent. Obviously, it depends on how many people are using social media, how much they're using it, how susceptible they are, and also on the interaction with their peers in person, so offline. But we found that this polarization is not necessarily bad, and it can drive people that are concerned about certain issues to bring their concerns to real life by giving them the sense of security online, like building these online communities. But there were many results. We ran tons of models and tons of different simulations, and most of them were trying to exclude policies or courses of action that will most likely not work based on our simulations, and kind of narrow down the range of what we can do to achieve some kind of change that we want.
Did you face any challenges when sharing this model on comsys.net, or documenting the model for better accessibility and availability?
Well, I thought it was relatively easy to share it in terms of like how the interface and everything, like the user experience was great. I would say obviously writing a manual for people to use the model is just time consuming, but not difficult. Um, I was very happy that there is an opportunity to share in case people who are trying to learn how to use NetLog or trying to maybe build something similar can have this structure of like a skeleton, and then if they can come up with better ways um, to describe, peer influence, social media, all these influences, they can just change those functions without having to write the whole code. So I don't think there were any necessary difficulties. Some adjustments needed to be made because the code relied on actual data that I wasn't able to share online because it's not mine. And so those were like small adjustments that needed to be made, but it wasn't any real challenge or hindrance.
What do you envision as the next steps for this model? Are there plans to refine the model further, or extend it to explore additional influencing factors or decision-making mechanisms?
So Right now, I'm not planning on continue working along those lines, just because my research interests have kind of somewhat shifted. But I think if one wanted to improve it, the two most important directions would be one, having better data, um, having just larger data set overall, but most importantly, more diverse. The data set that I used was specifically from a Spanish consumers, but having better data, maybe more diverse data would be better to improve the decision-making model. And the other would be obviously redefining or improving the influencing functions to maybe some more sophisticated ones. Um, yeah, those would be definitely the two directions to improve it, not necessarily extend, but just make it more realistic, more applicable,